So let's talk about a war that only lasted about 6 months but completely redrew the map of Europe. We're diving into the Franco-Prussian War. It was incredibly swift, unbelievably brutal, and the whole thing was kicked off by something surprisingly small.
It honestly sounds like something straight out of a political thriller, right? But this actually happened. We're going to unpack how one single, carefully manipulated message managed to build an entire empire and light a fuse that would smolder for decades, eventually exploding into World War I. Okay, so to really get how this all went down, you first have to meet the man pulling all the strings, a true puppet master of European politics.
This guy right here is Otto von Bismarck, and his ambition was absolutely monumental. He wanted to take the dozens of scattered, independent German states and unite them into one single, powerful empire, all under the leadership of his home state, Prussia. But to pull that off, he needed something big, something to make all these rival states forget their differences and fight together. He needed a common enemy, and he had a very specific one in mind: France.
And wouldn't you know it, a golden opportunity just fell right into his lap. The Spanish throne suddenly became vacant, and it was offered to a prince from the Hohenzollern family, who just so happened to be a distant cousin of the Prussian king. Well, France, led by Emperor Napoleon III, completely freaked out. The thought of being surrounded by Prussian allies was their absolute worst nightmare, so they laid on the pressure, and the candidate actually withdrew. So, crisis averted, right? Well, not for Bismarck. For him, this was just the opening act. Yeah, see, for Bismarck, this wasn't the end of the crisis. It was the perfect beginning. He just needed one more little push, and he was about to get it in the form of a simple, everyday telegram. The French, you see, weren't quite satisfied. Their ambassador actually cornered the Prussian king, William I, while he was at a spa town called Ems. He demanded a promise that a Prussian would never again be a candidate for the Spanish throne. The king thought this was a bit much and politely refused. He then sent a telegram off to Bismarck just describing the perfectly calm, totally normal diplomatic encounter.
And here is where Bismarck shows his devious genius. He took that perfectly polite, boring telegram and, with just a few clever edits, he turned it into a weapon. His new version made it sound like the king had publicly humiliated the French ambassador, and that the ambassador had been incredibly arrogant to the king. It was a complete masterpiece of political spin.
And the timing? Oh, the timing was just perfect. Bismarck leaked his doctored inflammatory version to the press on July 14th, Bastille Day, France's national holiday. You can just imagine what happened next. The French public went ballistic, completely exploding in patriotic fury, demanding war to avenge their national honor. Emperor Napoleon III really had no choice but to give them what they wanted. And just like that, Bismarck had his war. So France walked right into Bismarck's trap, totally expecting some glorious victory. What they got instead was a brutal, shocking introduction to a whole new kind of warfare: the industrial meat grinder.
I mean, you really can't overstate the difference between these two armies. The Prussian military was this incredible marvel of modern logistics. They used railways and telegraphs to move hundreds of thousands of men to the front with terrifying surgical precision. The French army, on the other hand, well, they were brave for sure, but they were a logistical mess. Their mobilization was slow, disorganized, and chaotic. The war was pretty much decided before the first big battle even started.
And that big decisive moment came at the Battle of Sedan. The Prussian army pulled off this brilliant encirclement, trapping the main French force completely. And then came the move that sent shockwaves across the entire continent. The Emperor of France, Napoleon III himself, was captured on the battlefield. I mean, a monarch hadn't been captured in battle for centuries. This was an absolute catastrophe for France.
Back in Paris, when the news of the emperor's capture hit, the government basically just dissolved. Poof! The Second French Empire was dead. In its place, a new republic was declared, and they vowed to fight on. But, with their main army completely gone, their situation was beyond desperate.
The Prussians marched on Paris, and what happened next was one of the most harrowing and humiliating periods in the city's entire long history. The Prussian army didn't even try to storm the city. Nope. They just surrounded it, cut it off from the rest of the world, and waited. For 4 brutal, agonizing winter months, Paris starved. The desperation was just grim.
I mean, to survive, Parisians ate anything they could get their hands on. Rats, cats, dogs. They even ate the animals in the Paris Zoo, including two famous and beloved elephants named Castor and Pollux. It was a complete nightmare.
And while Paris was literally starving, Bismarck delivered his final crushing blow. He gathered all the German princes, not in Berlin, but in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, the very symbol of French power and glory. And there, they proclaimed King William I as the first Kaiser, or emperor, of a new unified German empire. It was the ultimate act of humiliation. So the war was over, but its consequences? Ugh, they were just getting started. The peace treaty that followed wasn't designed to create peace. It was designed to create a wound that would never heal. The terms of the peace treaty were just brutal. First, Germany ripped away two French provinces, Alsace and Lorraine, regions full of people who considered themselves French. Then, they slapped France with a massive payment of 5 billion francs, an astronomical sum at the time, really designed to cripple their economy for years to come. And just like that, the entire balance of power in Europe was shattered. For centuries, Paris had been the political and cultural heart of the continent, but practically overnight, that center of gravity shifted to Berlin. Bismarck's unified Germany was now, without a doubt, the most powerful nation in Europe. And in France, the humiliation of the defeat, and especially the loss of Alsace-Lorraine, created this deep, burning national obsession known as revanche, which just means revenge. For the next 40 years, French politics, French culture, everything was driven by this one single goal, to one day get their revenge on Germany. And that festering wound would lead directly into the trenches of World War I. And that brings us right back to our big question. Bismarck got his empire, but in doing so, he lit this fire of vengeance that would eventually consume all of Europe. So what do you think? Was his edited telegram the single most consequential piece of fake news ever written? Or was a showdown between a rising Germany and an established France bound to happen anyway? It's a question historians still argue about to this day.